The biggest question Stephen King is asked is horror all you write? In 1974, after Carrie, King's first published novel, was published, his editor Bill Thompson asked for a follow-up, which King passed along 2 novels, one called Second Coming and the other called Blaze. Blaze, which wasn't very good, was a more sentimental piece, very reminiscent of Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. It was later rewritten and published under the name Richard Bachman in 2007. Second Coming was the novel they decided to go with, which was retitled Salem's Lot. With Salem's Lot being a vampire story to follow up Carrie, a novel about a telekinetic girl who had enough and turned into the worst prom date ever, King's editor expressed his fear King would be typecast as a horror writer. I can just imagine King making a jack-off motion. By the time Salem's Lot was published, King had moved his family to Colorado, where he was working on a novel about a haunted Colorado hotel, which became The Shining, a third novel in the horror genre. So King became known as a horror writer, and regardless of his editor's concerns, was able to ride it all the way to the bank. The checks cashed the same, regardless of genre. But is horror all Stephen King has managed to write? The novella collection Different Seasons is his foray into other genres. The novella The Body was written shortly after Salem's Lot. Apt Pupil was written after The Shining. Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption was written after The Dead Zone, and The Breathing Method after Firestarter. It's like these short, non-horror novels were a decompression after finishing a large horror one. When it came time to decide to publish Different Seasons, his editor, who was a man named Alan Williams at this point, expressed his love for Cujo and was eager to see what was next from the master of horror. He was dismayed of King's intentions of publishing a 4-novella collection of off-genre stories, but relented after King promised one of the stories could be classified as horror, The Breathing Method. And he had a novel about a haunted car in the works as well, which, of course, is everyone's favorite Plymouth Fury, Christine. Different Seasons was published in 1982, and as of this recording, 3 of the 4 novellas have been made into movies. The first movie from Different Seasons made was based on the story The Body, retitled for movie audiences as Stand By Me, released in 1986, starring the late River Phoenix, a young Wesley Crusher, that hunk from Sliders, and Corey, the other Corey. And who can forget a big boss from Metal Gear Solid 5 himself as Ace Merrill, Castle Rock bad boy extraordinaire. As much as this was different from the work King was known for, it showcased how well he could write coming-of-age tales. The main characters make up a loser's club of sorts, Chris Chambers being the misunderstood bad boy with a heart of gold. Gordy LeChance, who just lost his brother, is reminded daily by his parents that they wished it was him who died. Teddy Duchamp, who lived at home with his dad, who suffered from PTSD before people really knew what that was and suffered the abuse because of it. And Vern Tessio, who was the local fat dorky kid. You don't have to be a Stephen King enthusiast to see where these dynamics come up in works such as It and Dreamcatcher. Definitely Stephen King tropes. The second movie was made from the story Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption. This film was made by Frank Darabont, who also went on to make The Green Mile and The Mist. The title for Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption, Rita Hayworth, was dropped from the title after actresses would show up to audition for the titular character, though there was no Rita Hayworth in the film. Having not read the script, many simply assumed it was a Rita Hayworth biopic. So the movie title was changed to The Shawshank Redemption. Though even that, the title was not the best to advertise to general movie audiences what the movie was. What the hell is a Shawshank Redemption? Oh, Oh, it's about a prison called Shawshank and a guy wrongly convicted, breaking free and making the system pay. Okay, got it. It ended up being a total box office bomb in 1994. It only made $16 million on a $25 million budget. But it has since found itself ranked near the top of best movies ever lists. Stephen King visited the prison scene again in his 1996 novel, The Green Mile, which I already mentioned Darabont adapted as well. This story really showcased how King could write friendships, namely between Dufresne and Red, characters who shouldn't get along, yet are all the better for it. The third story to be made into a movie was 1998's apt Pupil, starring Brad Renfro and Ian McKellen. This was about a young man finding out an old neighbor is actually a Holocaust death camp criminal hiding out in the US. He makes an agreement to hear all the stories you wouldn't hear in history class, or he'd turn them in. And some of the dynamics of the story, such as the older gentleman and young person, was revisited in the Hearts in Atlantis story Low Men in Yellow Coats with Bobby Garfield and Ted Brodigan, as well as some historical aspects that were revisited in 11/22/63. Stephen King will always be most famous for his horror, but his other cross-genre or off-brand work has been immensely popular. I recall seeing an interview with King once where he recounted a story where he was in a grocery store and a woman said to him, "I could never get into that horror stuff. You should learn to write something uplifting like that Shawshank Redemption." He should indeed. Okay, so this is the book Different Seasons that we just discussed. Most of the information in this video actually came right from the afterword from this collection. Stephen King is usually pretty thorough in his afterwords, and he has them in a lot of his novels, and especially his collections. His collections end up having a lot of kind of stories of where this story came from, where it was originally published, what it's about, things like that. A lot of forwards and afterwards and things of that nature. Really interesting, especially if you're an aspiring writer. So I remember this. I was very familiar with Stand By Me growing up. That was a classic. And I remember in like late 80s and whatever, whenever my twin brother and our older brother, whenever like there was a dog around, we'd always just be like, "Chopper, sick balls." I don't know. That was just a very quotable movie. And Shawshank Redemption was actually it's quite a quotable movie too. I wasn't really familiar with that growing up until I started reading Stephen King. Well, actually, I started reading Stephen King when I was 12. So prior to that, it probably wasn't until a couple years after Shawshank Redemption came out. It came out in '94. So maybe not till like 97 was I really too familiar with Shawshank Redemption. But that one, yeah, that if anybody asked me what my favorite movie is, I always just kind of go to Shawshank Redemption as kind of like my go-to, where, hey, I give you an answer and you're not going to argue with me about it because it's probably true. Yeah, definitely if you don't have to be into horror at all, or Stephen King for that matter, really, to enjoy this book. I'd recommend Different Seasons to just about everyone. I will say though that all of these novellas are good. Probably the weakest one is The Breathing Method, which there isn't a movie for yet. But I believe one is in the works. But I will say that Shawshank Redemption is probably, I would say the movie might actually be better than the novella in here. The novella is only like 90 pages. and it feels like the movie actually expands on it. Kind of streamlines it a little bit, and expands on it at the same time. So I think it actually tells the story a little bit better. Which is very unusual, with written work, movie versus book or versus story. But these stories end up, the reason why the movies work out so well is because there's a lot of character and it's the right length to do the story justice, because you watch a lot of Stephen King movies, even if you enjoy it, you can tell there's something missing. Because oftentimes, how do you make an 800-page book into a 2-hour movie? Or what they tried to do with The Dark Tower, how do you make a 3,000-page series or something into a 90-minute movie? Well, the answer is you don't. Or at least you don't do it very well. So I think with TV and streaming services really coming into its own as the medium of choice for these kind of longer adaptations, like season-long series just based on a book. I think Stephen King his work is going to really shine in that medium and not so much in the movie format. And speaking of that, later this month, actually, in a couple days, on December 12th, I believe, The Stand is going to premiere on CBS All Access, and I think it's a 10-episode series. Anyway, so stand by for this channel. I'll be going over those episodes and whatnot, and hopefully I can keep consistent with that, depending on my schedule and whatever. So, I really enjoyed making this video, and like and subscribe. There will be more Stephen King content on this channel. So if you're familiar with this channel, I'll do a lot of Star Trek content and Stephen King content, and I'll probably be covering a lot of Metallica stuff too, because those are like my 3 pop culture obsessions: Metallica, Star Trek, and Stephen King. Okay, well, thank you. Please like, subscribe, and share.